Happy Friday afternoon, everyone.
We made it again.
Yeah, Brad Newbury, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Excited for this.
We were just talking before we hit record, just to bring everybody up to speed. We have not, funny enough, for a health show, we've talked to a strikingly little to no amount of EMT type people. So it's kind of funny because, like, most people, when they think of health, an ambulance isn't too far out of their imagination.
No.
Right?
What's amazing to me, Brad, and I don't know, you're up in Massachusetts. I don't know if this is the same thing, right? So I'm regulated by the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene, but EMTs go through Department of Labor, I think, which is so weird to me because, like, I can't think of anything more than stabilizing somebody to live. That's medical, and I think is it its association with the fire department or emergency services that gets them shuttled over that way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you mean the Department of Transportation, right? So we fall.
Oh, yeah.
From a federal program, we fall under the DOT, Department of Transportation, and I think it goes back in the 70s where they saw ambulance transport as things that went over the road, right? Just like a trailer. However, that's probably where that regulation, that's where we get our education and our standards for ambulance specs, those kinds of things. But we're all regulated. Mostly every state has a Department of Health type of regulation. So whether it be so here in Massachusetts, we're regulated by the Department of Health, Office of Emergency Medical Services. There are licensing or certification folks, and they're the ones who we're heavily regulated both on the education side, but also on the practitioner side from DPH. So
okay, all right, good to know.
And there's a lot of discussion about how to move. They want to move EMS out of the DOT, put it under public safety, those kinds of things. So there's lots of discussions around that too as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I never knew that, actually. And even when Tom was saying it, I'm kind of like, what the hell is Tom talking about? I had no idea.
No, it's weird because, like, the morticians are the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene. And you're like, at that rate, I don't know if they need that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they need regulations too, but I think they're past any of that.
Yeah. And Brad, you were in fire service too. I know these things get connected a lot. I know I have a lot of friends that have done both, actually, weirdly. What is the connection between those two things? Just
so I mean, do you want the origin story of that?
We got time, man.
All right. So I grew up watching this show Emergency. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar.
I'm aware of it. I've never seen it.
But back in the early 70s, it was a show about LA County fire paramedics. And I remember I tell the story all the time. I used to sit in front of my black and white TV, and most of the folks probably that, especially my kids, have never seen a black and white TV. But so it used to be a show that highlighted the career and day-to-day operations of LA County Fire Rescue Squad 51, which was this team of 2 paramedics, but they were also firefighters too. They were cross-trained. And so watching that show, growing up with that show, I really wanted to be Johnny and Roy. And as I got older, I had an uncle who was in the Fall River Fire Department here in Massachusetts. And when I was about 10 years old, I got to go ride along with him. And that was amazing, right? And that really started me on my journey. That was the beginning of me looking at this life of service of what firefighters did every day. And then when I turned 16, I joined our local fire department. So I grew up in Tiverton, Rhode Island. And so at 16 years old, back in the mid 80s, which I think is interesting now, is that they used to let us fight fires when we were 16 years old.
That is bananas. That wouldn't even be on the realm of possibility.
I'm afraid to get my daughter a driver's permit at 16.
Yeah.
There are a number of volunteer ambulance squads around the country, and they have Fire Explorer programs. Most probably would force them to wait till they were 18 at this point, but they also have volunteers that are definitely in their starting at 16. So it is something that is still out there, and particularly in the rural areas. I don't know what Maryland is, what their age limits are, but Maryland has a huge volunteer fire EMS.
I mean, everything around is volunteer. Yeah.
So once I started, I literally, in my high school years, I lived at the firehouse. I would come home from school, do my homework, and I would go to the firehouse. I would sleep there, go on
Oh,
calls
wow.
in the middle of the night, and then go to school the next morning.
Wow.
So it was always really a part of who I felt calling to be. And when I turned 18, I actually went to. It was funny because I got a scholarship to go to college, like a full ride scholarship. And in my first for engineering, in my first year, I hated it so bad because that's not what I wanted. And so
Sure.
I dropped out of college. My mother didn't talk to me for a month. She was so mad at me. And but that's not what I wanted to do. I felt this incredible calling to take care of people, both on the fire and EMS side. And I love to go into fires, right? I mean, any firefighter who really loves the job loves going to fires too. Not that we wish bad things on people. We just want to be there when they happen. Because if we have that knowledge, skill, and ability to make a difference in someone's life, that's the key. And so when I turned 18, I went to EMT school. I dropped out of college. I went to EMT school, became an EMT, and at 19 years old, I went to paramedic school. And by the time I was 20 years old, I graduated. And I like to say I could give drugs, but I couldn't drink alcohol.
Yeah.
Which is true. And but as I continued to that journey, both on the EMS side as a volunteer, I knew that that's what I wanted to do as a career. And eventually, I was hired by the Stoughton Fire Department in 1997. And in our department, we have both fire and EMS. So we have ambulances as well as we have fire trucks.
Oh.
We cross staff both of them. Even our engine companies have paramedic level care that we provide to our community, with advanced life support equipment from the engine company too as well. So if the ambulance isn't available or they're going to be delayed, there are paramedics assigned to the engine, and they will come off. They'll come off and they'll start care of patients that way too as well. So for our department size, we're pretty busy, and it's been an incredible career there. Both on and I've had a very eclectic career, both in private EMS, hospital-based EMS, and in the fire service. And right now, the fire service, I believe statistically, is the largest provider of EMS across the country. So there is this marriage between fire and EMS, and it makes a lot of sense in so many ways. Some people will argue that they should be kept separate. And a lot of places around the world, and I'm very blessed that I get to, in another hat that I wear, because not only am I a fire captain, and in my department we don't have battalion chiefs, but that's my role. So I'm in a command vehicle, so I'm a shift commander. And but I also, I founded one of the largest EMS institutions in the country where we teach EMTs and paramedics here at our school at NMETC. That's where I am today, at National Medical Education Training Center. So we teach EMTs and paramedics from across the country and around the globe. And 2007, I launched one of the first online hybrid paramedic programs in the country. And you think about that now, 2007, no one was teaching EMS.
No one was doing that.
Right.
No. And
that sounds like a COVID-related technology, let's say.
And our school grew exponentially during COVID because we already had that system nailed. And, and I always I joke that we were well positioned for a pandemic, but the reality was that wasn't even on the radar. And just like some of you, just like all of you and the individuals that are listening to this and yourselves, if you have any entrepreneurial spirit at any point, our goal is to help people solve problems. And a young woman came to me and in 2005, and she said to me, "Hey, I want to come to paramedic school. Can you help me?" And I was like, "Well, tell me more. What's your challenge?" And she said that, she was a single mom. She had 5 kids. Her husband didn't support her financially. He had left her, and she lived with her mom. And she was working 60 to 80-hour work weeks, trying just to support her family. And she said, "But I really want to be a paramedic." And I could tell that she had that real passion in her that, and just by not only words but her actions. And she was there for this class that I was teaching that day. That she really wanted that and wanted it for all the right reasons. But unfortunately, we couldn't help her because we only had a traditional paramedic program that I was teaching. And so that story really resonated with me. I drove home that night and was really thinking about how can I solve this problem? And, that put me on this incredible journey to figure out, was there a way? I remember walking in the house that night. My wife now is a nurse practitioner. I have 3 great kids too. My middle daughter's a nurse practitioner. And I wrote this, we'll talk about the book here. I wrote this with my youngest daughter. But we're a healthcare family. And as my wife is sitting there doing her BSN at UMass Boston online, I said, why can't we help this young lady? If we're doing this for nursing, why can't we do this for EMS? So that kind of set that journey afloat. So it really, and another hat that I get to wear is I work with the Disaster Medicine Fellowship at the Beth Israel Hospital in Boston, and where we teach disaster medicine and disaster response to an international group of physicians and nurses. So that,
oh wow,
yeah, that takes me around the world doing some really amazing things with this group.
You know, it's funny. We had we hosted a movie premiere for a movie called Suck It Up, Buttercup here in Baltimore, and one of the people in it was Terry Mulligan, who's head of head of emergency,
University of Maryland head of ED department. Yeah, but he has a master's in public health, specifically in hospital systems.
Right. And he goes all over the world. So like talking to him on the show and then seeing him in the movie, and we have a relationship we've fostered after that. Mm-hmm. In the stories on the international level are interesting because at the end of the day, we are all solving the same problem, whether we're doing it in Beirut or Boston. Like it's still like the core problem is the same, but how it gets done is wildly different. And I really just have found that to be a very interesting story that I never would have thought about. And it's a lot more involved than I think anyone gives it credit for. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot happening there.
Well, you know, and especially in a disaster type scenario, to share information across, global lines really, makes better outcomes for everyone.
And with our fellowship, we have the Global Society of Disaster Medicine, and we actually have these centers of excellence in a number of different countries. So we come together collaboratively, both on research and education. So we're teaching across the globe with our centers of excellence to promote, disaster medicine and disaster response. So it's been an incredible journey.
Can I ask you and back this up a little bit? And this is kind of the most rudimentary, and I feel dumb for not knowing this, Brad. The difference between a paramedic and an EMT. Is there a difference, and what is it?
There is a big difference.
Okay.
There's about 1,000 hours difference in training.
Okay.
That's not inconsequential.
That's not little. Yes.
Yeah.
And so EMTs can do basic life support. So they'll learn CPR, they'll learn immobilization. It depends what state you live in. They can do things like maybe give you epinephrine for an allergic reaction, and they can use an AED, an automatic external defibrillator, to shock a person who's in cardiac arrest. And they might be able to, and again, depends where they work. They might be able to give you some medication if you're having an asthma attack. However, they don't learn the pathophysiology behind the disease process. And they don't have the advanced formulary and the advanced skills. So let me give an example. A paramedic can not only start IVs, they could do that peripherally, say in a vein, but they can also drill a needle into your bone, whether it be in your humerus or into your tibia. Some do sternum. So they could do that to start an IV if they had to, if they couldn't get a vein. But we could also do things like chest decompression. So if you had a tension pneumothorax or air inside of your lung, inside of your chest cavity that was squeezing your heart and lungs, we can stick a needle in your chest and relieve that air. If you had an airway obstruction, we could do a cricothyrotomy, where we could go in and actually put a tube into the cricothyroid membrane. We can intubate patients, so we can take an airway and put that down into the trachea, and using a couple of different devices to do that. So we also do advanced cardiac care. So we have EKG monitors. We do 12-lead ECG interpretation to identify whether you're having a heart attack or not, and then make a decision whether you should go to the cardiac care center or just go to a community hospital. And so there's a wide difference in both, not only the medication formulary, but skill set, education, and then truly the level at which you learn medicine is different.
So when a bus is rolled out for, a fallen and I can't get up kind of thing, like, is it normally an EMT that gets deployed, or is it a paramedic, or do they put one of each in the, like, how's that usually distribute?
My favorite line is, it depends. Not the depends,
sure.
But it depends on the situation, right? And it depends on the community that you live in or work in, because each response model is different. Some places would have a 2-tier system, like Boston EMS. Boston EMS has a 2-tier system, so they have 30 plus EMS EMT level ambulances, and they have 5 or 6 or maybe 7, depending on the day and impact times, paramedic units in the whole city for 500,000 people. So
Wow.
if it's just the person who stubbed their toe, or maybe it's a not a critical emergency, they're going to get 2 EMTs and an ambulance. But in my community, in the community that I work in, all of our ambulances are staffed with a minimum of 1 paramedic and 1 EMT, and a lot of times you might have 2 paramedics in that ambulance. Plus, you're going to get an engine company with at least 1 other paramedic that's coming there too as well. So you're going to get an entire team. I like to say in our town, we send a basketball team to your emergency, right? Because we send at least a minimum of 3 people, sometimes 4 in our engine company, and then 2 in the ambulance. So 5 people are showing up. So
wow.
And there's a lot of there. I mean, taking care of people requires people power, right? So there's and yes, if Mrs. Smith has packed her bags and she's standing on the sidewalk and she's waiting for you when you arrive, well, we can cancel the engine company. We probably don't need that. But if there's a critical emergency going on, and so we had to do CPR, or we're carrying someone down from the third floor of a house, or whatever that looks like, it takes people power to do that.
Yeah. I saw yesterday, actually, I was coming home from dinner and I saw a full engine going. We let him pass, and a couple blocks later I get up there and they were tending to a homeless person who was like sprawled out on the street. And I was kind of like, my first reaction was like, why the hell did they deploy this entire fire truck down here for? But to your point, like, I don't know that they always know what they're rolling into. So maybe it's
maybe they didn't have an ambulance ready too,
Well, and that the ambulance could be coming from the hospital on a delay.
Right.
Our ambulances are tied up a lot because it's a very busy system. So whether they're coming from the hospital or they're coming from a different part of the town, that time makes a difference, particularly when someone's not breathing or their heart has stopped. So
for sure.
So sending the closest unit makes a huge difference in the survivability of patients who are critically sick.
Well, God, they make us recertify CPR every time and I actually was telling Matt I'm redoing my national certification now. And I'm like, oh, shit, I didn't take my 4 CEUs of CPR. But like the time in which you start chest compressions radically changes the outcome for someone, correct? I mean, that's the number one thing that you can do.
Statistically, every minute that you don't perform CPR after someone's heart has stopped, they lose about 10% survivability.
Wow.
So wow. Yeah, it's pretty significant.
So it's a ticking time bomb, literally. Like
it really is.
Yeah.
And without, the statistic is that out of hospital cardiac arrest survivability, only about 3.5% of patients without bystander CPR will live.
That's not a big number.
It is not. It's a pretty small number, but that number nearly triples when you add bystander CPR.
Oh, really? So it's a dramatic improvement to the outcome.
Dramatic.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we talk about in our book, and some of the stories of some of the survivors that we have was because of bystander CPR, including my own dad. We'll get to that story.
Yeah. So I guess the reason for the book is was it one of those things where you were sort of like, you get to a certain point in your career, you're like, listen, I've done a lot. Now it's time to talk about it a lot or share it along. I mean, is that kind of a contributing factor?
It is in some ways, but in other ways it wasn't, right? So I have been telling stories. So I've been telling stories not only to our providers, but in our paramedic school. So at graduation, I had this talk that I would give to our exiting paramedic students. And the title of that was, what does it mean to save a life? And I think that many people don't truly understand the impact that they can have on another human being if they have the knowledge, skill, and ability to do something that helps contribute to saving somebody's life. And whether it be a bystander, or whether it be an EMT or a paramedic. And then what happened was I would tell the story about this gentleman named Frank. And I was involved in Frank's resuscitation in 1994. And there are some very interesting circumstances of how I stayed connected with Frank over the years. But certainly you can read about that in the book. But the gist of it, of the talk, was that post resuscitation, we defibrillated Frank 5 times that day.
Oh,
And Frank woke up and was at the hospital. By the time we got to the hospital, he had woke up and he was talking to his family. And my partner and I really just went on about our day. And I was working for a very busy hospital-based system that day, and my partner Debbie and I were just running other calls. And many times in our line of work, we drop the patient off the hospital. We might see them, as we come back in, and we saw that they went up to the ICU or they went somewhere else. And we generally wouldn't stay connected. But a year after Frank had gone into cardiac arrest, his family had this "Thank God Dad's Alive" party 1 year later, and they invited my partner and I to go. So
that's awesome.
My boss called us into her office, and we thought we were in trouble. But the reality was that she was telling us about this invite, and immediately Deb and I were like, "Oh, we're young too. Don't forget, I'm in my early 20s, and I'm like, oh, that seems really awkward. I don't know if we should do this." And she holds up her hand. She's like, "Stop! You're going. The hospital decided, the PR. They love the PR. You're going."
Yeah.
And so as we were walking up, I look at Deb and she's like, "I'm so uncomfortable. I don't know about this." And as soon as we opened the door, I write in the book how we literally walked into this wall of emotion, and how the family was cheering. And as we came in the house, Deb and I kind of looked at each other. She had this nervous giggle. I'm like, "Don't stop laughing." And it wasn't anything the family did. It was just kind of this, they were celebrating us, and it was amazing in itself. But, as we made our way through the crowd and got to meet Frank, and he was just so thankful at what we had done for him and his family. And this is a year after his arrest. Well, fast forward a couple more years, I'm in the firehouse and I'm coming down the stairs. I walk around the corner and there's his son, Chris, that I had met at this party, standing inside the watchroom of our firehouse. And he looks at me and he's like, "Hey, Brad." He comes over, he gives me a hug. And there's another firefighter there, Jim Curtin, who's looking at me and looking at Chris, looking at me, looking at Chris. And he's like, "How do you guys know each other?" And he goes, "He saved my dad." He's like, "He saved my dad." And Jimmy comes running over. He's like, "You saved my Uncle Frank?" So then from then on, he became Uncle Frank, right? And then every year, Jimmy has a 4th of July party, or really a July party. And then I really began to understand, because they're a big Irish drinking family who loves to have celebrate anything. And anyway, so every year I got to see Frank and his family because we would always go to this party. And Frank lived 25 years post resuscitation.
Wow.
And if you think about the incredible impact that Frank continued to have on his family, and we actually brought all of either whether they were survivors, some of their family members, here to our studio, and we interviewed them on camera. So we have these amazing stories all captured, and that's how we wrote the book. And
that's
so
crazy.
the name of the book, and this is interesting too. So the name of the book is called The Saved Effect. Have you ever heard of the butterfly effect?
Yes,
for sure.
Right. So the butterfly flaps its wing in South America, it creates ripples, and it changes the weather pattern in Oklahoma. But what are the ripples when a life is saved? And it was actually my daughter Kira, who wrote the book with me, who came up with the name, because she came to me and she said, "What do you think about, like the butterfly effect, when a life is saved, the ripples that moves out you have no idea what the impact of those ripples will be." And I had always told the story, because she heard me tell the story many times. I told a story about how my son and I once were standing at a pond fishing, and he threw a pebble into the pond. And I remember standing there watching the ripple of that in that closest tight circle. And then later on, as I thought about that as a metaphor, as that circle expanded from that rock going underwater, it's like a life being saved. And it's also like a life being lost. And in that first tight circle, the people who are impacted the most are the inner family of that individual. And then as that circle expands out, it's their friends, their coworkers, their community. But you never know where those ripples are going to go. So that's where we came up with that. That's where Kira came up with the name, The Saved Effect. So just like the butterfly effect, the ripples that move out, what happens when a life is saved? And we have some amazing stories in this book, including another story that will just blow your mind. John Perino went into cardiac arrest on the dance floor in Abington, Massachusetts, in a Polish club. And the story of why I was there that night is interesting. We don't have time to unpack that whole thing. But I was working with Jack Glenn that night. Both Jack and I Jack had just started in Abington as a firefighter, but was moonlighting, working per diem at the hospital with me. And I had just started the fire academy that week for Stoughton Fire. And we just happened to be in the Abington Fire Station. And anyway, the call comes in, and we get to the Polish Club right with the Abington firefighters. We were in their firehouse when the call came in. And Jack had forgot his jacket that night, and we went back to get it at the fire station. And we just happened to be there, actually out of our area. We covered the south part of our service area. The north service area was a different truck, but we were out of our area, and when the call came in. So you think about, everything.
All the coincidences there. Yeah.
And there's so many of these in the book. And so as we walk in, I see this man and woman doing excellent CPR on the dance floor. And I'll never forget it, because it was like, this guy.
Excellent. The form is tremendous.
This is great.
I mean, if you know, right? Like, if you know what
sure,
it looks,
yeah, these people know what they're doing. Yeah.
But I never knew until we actually did research later on the story and curated, found out actually who that guy was, nearly 30 years later. Like, I didn't know who that guy was. And because again, so we get in there, and the most, and you two, I can already tell with your personality that you'll love this next part. I remember kneeling down and going to put an airway in, and I see the disco ball is just moving around on the floor. It's still turning, right? The band stops playing, but the lights, things that you just remember in a moment, right? And I know that you guys are into to medicine and physiology, and we can talk about how physiology impacts, especially during a response. But anyway, I look to my right for some reason, and I see the big placard in front of the bass drum in the band, and the name of the band was No Exit.
Oh man!
And I can't even make that up. Actually, I went back and I researched the newspaper article just to make sure I wasn't, because I didn't remember exactly what it was. But so the name of the band was No Exit, and John wasn't going to exit that night.
Oh, wow.
We did more than 30 plus minutes of CPR right there on the
Holy shit.
And in my world, that length of time of doing CPR, and because CPR is not,
that's got to be exhausting.
Well, and we had a great team, so they continue to rotate. I mean, now we actually have a CPR machine. We have a Lucas device that we would use, but back then we didn't. So it was just people power. So we would rotate everybody every couple of minutes.
Is this that little bracket little thing that goes over a gurney that just has a
It has a plunger type thing. It goes up Yeah. So that's called at least the brand name for that machine is the Lucas device. It's a CPR.
I unfortunately saw my neighbor who did not make it with one of those come out of his house. I'd never seen one before. I'm like, what the hell's going on over there? And it was just
too.
It was a lot. And it was 2 a.m. Everyone's on the street. Their sirens are lighting up the entire neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
It was veg. So that it's just a lot of chaos, visual chaos. Right. And to have this.
I've never seen it before. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd never seen one before. And I had the show by that point too. So you'd think somebody would have mentioned this fucking thing at some point, but no, I just,
I gotta say, I'm sitting here listening to all this, Brad, and I gotta say, in my head, this is a drama on prime time.
Oh yeah, totally.
Everything about you screams fire, the Boston accent, all of it. It's all it's all textbook dramas, and then you have a little bit of humor in there to kind of show the humanity of it all.
NBC.
And I swear, honestly. NBC, Tom Selleck plays somebody, something like that.
Well,
it sounds so spot on.
Yeah. That's funny.
But if I had to guess, fire chief. Yeah, totally. Knowing nothing about you, you say 5 things to me, I'm like, he's a fire chief.
Yeah.
100%.
Meanwhile, he goes, "Oh, I tell stories." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure your kids will tell us all about how many stories you tell." Yeah, you sound like a great storyteller.
My kids would too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And Kira, and by the way, Kira was supposed to be here with us today, but she's getting married next week. And
congrats!
Good for her. Thanks.
Yeah.
And today was the only day she could get her hair done. And if anyone, especially the audience, you'll understand that, she could have-
100%.
But normally
We're all
she
married here, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, we got it.
she's gonna live in a bubble
Yeah.
until the wedding day. Then,
Yeah.
no, she believe me, but anyway. But here we are. We're on the dance floor and we're doing CPR, and we shock John 8 times, which is also interesting because many of the times we wouldn't get to 8 shocks, and people don't really understand how that works, right? So what's happening is the heart is fibrillating. So there's electrical activity. The heart muscle is basically like having a seizure, right? And what a defibrillation does is it actually shocks the heart. People think it jump starts the heart. It doesn't jump start the heart. It actually stops all electrical. Yeah. It's like doing a Control-Alt-Delete on your computer.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it stops and it hopes, just like when, back in the day when you hoped when you reset the computer and that you wouldn't
the
get
problem's
that new
gone.
screen.
Have you turned it off and back on?
Yeah.
Try plugging it and unplugging it.
Well, and that's kind of what happens to the heart. You stop all electrical activity, and you hope that through automaticity, which is a very innate property of cardiac cells, where they'll stop beating on their own. And so hoping that those cells will come back and beat. And a lot of times, though, when you have anoxia or hypoxia, a lack of oxygen, the physiology begins to change. So it gets really more and more challenging, particularly the more and more defibrillations you do. So at 8 defibrillations, having still electrical activity in the heart is something that at 30 plus minutes is unusual, right? That usually we would see either something would happen, a heartbeat would come back, or you would get asystole, which is a cessation of all electrical activity in the heart, and basically the heart has died. So we had hope. So we kept working really hard, and we ended up making the decision we got to move, and we get out to the ambulance, and we were in a non-transport vehicle, so in an SUV, and so my partner Jack jumped in the back of the ambulance with the crew, and he transported the hospital. I'm behind, and Jack calls me on the radio and he says, "Hey, we got orders from our physician to give him one more medication that was like the Doug Flutie Hail Mary."
Yeah.
And so the chances of that making any difference. And I remember talking to the doc and having the doc say to me, "What can it hurt?"
Yeah,
So
what can it? Yeah,
it can't hurt anything at this point. You can't hurt people. You can't hurt dead people.
Yeah,
right?
if he's on his way out, yeah.
Yeah. So I call Jack. He gives it to him. Calls me back. He's like, "Hey, I just shocked him one more time. He's got a pulse." Which I really didn't have a lot of hope for that at that point, because my experiences had shown me that at this long, that's not going to have a fairly positive outcome. If anything, he would have this significant brain injury, and maybe So when we get to the hospital, I'll never forget. I get out of the truck, and Jack said to me, "Hey, I had to give him sedation because he's starting to fight us, waking up." And which was because we don't forget too, we put a tube into his trachea, so
so he's all fucked up. Yeah, he's
right,
like,
exactly. So
he's like, "Oh shit, what's happening, man?"
Exactly.
Like, that's got to be terrifying. I can't even imagine waking up to that.
And I just remember when we moved him over in the hospital, and the first thing I did was I looked in his eyes, because generally when we see somebody who has a brain injury after a cardiac arrest like that, their pupils are dilated, and his weren't. So I had even more hope that night.
Good.
And to make an incredibly great story, John spent 2 weeks in a coma, and he woke up one day neurologically intact and went home to his family and lived another 27 years.
Wow.
Like 30 plus minutes of CPR, 9 defibrillations, 2 weeks in a coma, woke up, and then went on to have this great life. And it wasn't until he passed away. And you think, one, it shows my age in EMS, right? Because I lived long enough to see the arc of time of John. I didn't stay connected with John, but my partner at that night, Jack, did. And Jack is actually now the Abington fire chief. And so Jack had stayed connected with the family. When John had passed away, Jack had posted, he had gone to the wake, and he had posted a picture of him and John and his wife from a previous event that they had been to. And I said, and he talked about how John had passed away. And I said, I went in, I made a little post on Jack's Facebook page. And I said, Jack, I remember every detail about that call. Because there's one thing, I have an incredible memory. I don't know why. My friends think it's because I've never been drunk in my life. but that I have this real acute memory for detail, particularly when you're an extremist, right? And I think there's something to be said
Sure.
about that. And so Jack, so I posted in there, and then this John's daughter Lisa saw the post, and she came in and she said, "You two have no idea what you did for our family." That touched me in a way I've never been touched.
I'm sure. That's incredible. 27 years, dude. This is not like a casual, like I lived a little longer.
It wasn't like he was ready to, fall down, a month later.
No, it was so profound that, as I started really thinking about that, and there's a story of my own dad here too. But as that happened, I was like, wow, 27 years. He had 27 years of birthdays and celebrations and anniversaries.
I mean, you could have kids and grandkids in that amount of time.
Well, and Lisa had written inside there, she said, my dad, because of you two, my dad got to walk both his daughters down the aisle. He got to raise,
that's awesome, man.
He got to raise his grandchildren, and he got to meet two of his great-grandchildren. And that all started because two bystanders on the dance floor in the Polish club stepped forward that night, in this November night, and started CPR prior to our arrival.
All of your stories, so far have been crazy, but like, what was it about that one that made you go to that 8th zap, do you think? Like, was there something about that you just, like, what was different about it? I'm sure you've had thousands of calls where that didn't happen.
Well, it's because the way that we would attempt resuscitation and what we were seeing from a physiological standpoint, there was still heart muscle to work with. There was still electricity, meaning that there was still hope.
So that was it. It was just like a judgment call. Hey, man, this guy's not gone yet. We're going to keep working this problem until.
And really, at the time, it was like we didn't give up. And you wouldn't want a couple of paramedics coming to your house either who gave up. I mean, I work with a bunch of type A personality folks, and nobody wants to lose. And we don't want to lose when it comes to patients either. Right.
Sure.
And sometimes that can morally wound some of us. I've been fortunate to be healthy in my career, but really, I think when you think about post-traumatic stress and some of the things that really, not just paramedics, healthcare providers, firefighters, everybody that sees kind of like the worst of what mankind can do to each other, or some of the worst days of people's lives, it has an impact. And for me, I've seen where you're able to, if we've made an impact and not giving up, because no one wants to give up at that point. We're not going to give up until there's absolutely no more hope, right? Like there's nothing else we could do. If we have some tools or medication or things that we could do, we're going to keep doing it. And that's a trait that many healthcare providers have, and that we all want them to have, particularly physicians. And I actually tell a story in the book there too, with my own dad, and how I had to actually go to the physician and say, my dad needs to hear the reality of what's going on. Because
interesting,
the doctors don't want it. They're not going to give up. They're going to keep giving. They're like, okay, we could try this. We could try this. And my dad was a Special Forces Marine, right? He was a Force Recon Marine during the Vietnam era. There was the fight was in him, and he wasn't giving up, and and it's funny, in his head, he used to talk to himself, like, he'd be like, Newbury, you get your stuff together. Like, I mean, he had a different mindset. And those Special Forces guys do, right? I mean, if you ever listen to anything David Goggins did.
100%. Yeah.
David actually,
I know the type.
Yeah, David actually gave us a great endorsement for our book. So
that's awesome.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story.
I mean, so like with your dad, like, was that, how did the physician respond? I'm just curious how that,
So interesting enough, my dad suffered an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. He was 80 years old. He was at a dance recital for my niece, and my sister was there. And he came out of the dance recital after not feeling well, and he dropped in the parking lot. And two bystanders, Ashley and Scott, stepped up and started CPR right away. And I was actually here at school teaching some students, and you have to understand too, I had this amazing relationship with my father, and my whole life, my dad was my confidant, my supporter. He both from a fire officer standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. My dad led men into battle, like and
sure.
And he was, you know, even though he was this incredible Force Recon Marine, he was the best dad ever. Right. And so I had an amazing relationship with him. I called him the night before because I knew he was going to this dance recital, and he would go because his granddaughters were there. But man, did he always hate going to those recitals, because again, right? Like, you're there, these marathon 3 to 4 hour sessions, and your kid gets up there for 5 minutes and dances. But he loved his granddaughters, and he was going to support him. So I was teasing him that the night before. Anyway, I called him the next day, and exactly the time I was calling him to leave him, and to see how it went, to really just to tease him. He was in cardiac arrest, and my sister was calling me, and our phones both went to voicemail. I got his voicemail. I left him a message. She got my voicemail, and little did I know that Dad was on the ground in cardiac arrest. And she ends up calling my wife, and then my wife called me, and immediately she tells me she called. They're doing CPR on Dad in the parking lot. And so, at 80 years old, with all these other comorbidities, right, all these other medical problems that my dad had through COVID and everything else, the chances of survivability were less than 1%. I mean, less than 1%.
And you unfortunately know that better than anyone. So you're going into this story with the wrong kind of education that you don't necessarily. I don't know. That must be hard. That's got to be tough.
And knowing that, right, and knowing how tough that was, and so. I ended up, we beat the ambulance to the hospital. Oh, wow. I wasn't like I was driving like a maniac, but I couldn't at the time understand why they chose the hospital that they chose to go to. It wasn't making sense to me because there was a closer hospital, but I'm not going to second guess the paramedics that were there. I didn't know why, because sometimes hospitals are on diversion, they have internal emergencies. Like, there could be a number of reasons. So I remember standing outside the emergency room waiting for them. And I'm thinking, I've been to that same exact emergency room thousands of times in my career. And I mean thousands. It's not only in my service area, and I brought countless cardiac arrest patients through those doors. So I know the drill, right? They're going to get to the hospital. We're going to open the back doors. They're going to come out. They're going to be doing compressions, and they're going to move them into the hospital, and they're going to move them into the trauma room. And the doc's going to try for a few minutes, and then they're going to come out and say, sorry, we did everything we could. Nothing else we could do, right? Like, that was my expectation, because the last conversation that we had with my sister was they're doing CPR on Dad. And I know the chances, and my wife is a nurse, and my daughter is a nurse too. And they both knew the chances of survivability of that. And so I remember standing there, and the door's open. And one of the paramedics, Brian Anderson, looks over, sees me, looks back in the ambulance and says, Mr. Newbury, your son Brad's here. And I was like, what? I mean, I look over, I look inside the ambulance, and they wheel him out. And my father looks up at me and goes, hi, Brad. It's like, oh, goodness.
What the hell's going on?
We're talking about 12 to 14 minutes of CPR.
Yeah.
At least.
That's crazy.
And multiple defibrillations, multiple rounds of medications between the bystanders, the fire department shock them, the paramedics get there, they shock them. And at 80 years old, he woke up as they, and so, and it's an amazing story, the time later that came after. And I can't tell it without crying on camera here, so I won't do that. But because it's really an emotional story of what happened after. And definitely, I don't know if I sent you the digital version of the book, but I'll definitely get you that. You got to read it.
Oh yeah. Sounds great, man.
And so what it did for me, when you go back to that original question about, like, why did I write this book? I've seen I've lived both sides of the rescue and the rescuer, right? I've been on both sides of that. And I've seen how saving a life is not just one moment in time. Saving a life, it has an incredible impact. And where does that impact go? And so, with my dad, getting back to the story where, eventually over many months, he had gone through rehab and trying to get back, but he ended up having another heart attack. And he survived the heart attack, but his kidneys didn't really survive. And he had always said, if it came to it, he did not want to be on dialysis. My dad used to deliver home-based medications to patients. It's like a retirement job. My mother used to tell him all the time, "Oh, Joe, we need you to go to work." So he knew he was a people person, right? So he would drive around and deliver medications to homebound patients, and he loved it. Absolutely loved that job. And but he saw a lot of patients in dialysis, and he said to my sister and I, during COVID and other times when he was in the hospital, that he didn't want to be hooked up to machines. He's seen dialysis. He did not want that. And so, when we're there and the physician basically said, hey, told me that his kidneys were failing. There was nothing they could do. The only option was dialysis. But then another doc came in and tried to give him a little bit more hope, right? And said, oh, we could try this. We could try this. We could try this. And I knew the reality of that was that his kidney dialysis was the only thing. And finally, after talking to one of the docs, I said, listen, my dad has a no quit attitude. That is, he used to run marathons, ultra marathons. Like he was not only a fighter, but this guy, his mental toughness was so incredible. And I said, he's not going to give up. And so, and I said, you have to give it to him straight. So she agreed, and she came in and she had that conversation with him. And it was so funny. He literally flipped the switch. After that lady left, he knew, as I say in the book, he knew the fight had turned. And he said to me, all right, let's go. Like he wanted out right then and there. And wow. It's a great story about what happened after. But, as I look back and some of these stories, we have some other amazing stories in our book of individuals who had no business surviving that day. And the little micro moments that led up to it, including my own story, by the way. I was at a fire. I suffered a plaque rupture and had a 99% occlusion in my left anterior.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Bury that headline, huh, dude?
Yeah. So I had a full 99% LAD occlusion. And I remember the doc telling me, it's a great story of what happened. But I remember laying there and the doc telling me that. And I knew patients that had like 75%, 80% blockage who went into arrest and died. And by the way, when you block the LAD, the left anterior descending coronary artery, there's a term for that. It's called the widowmaker.
I was just going to say, isn't that the widowmaker?
Yes.
Like, isn't that the, yeah. I'm like,
yes. So I was actually fighting a fire. I was actually the incident commander for a fire in a healthcare facility when they believed that this incident happened to my heart. And
wow.
And the circumstances, again, that lined up for me to actually get a stress test a couple of days after the event, and then what led up to it, all the symptoms I was having. And so here, I look back particularly at our school, that was November of 2010 when that happened. We had just opened our school in April of 2010. And if I had died that day, which even the physician said to me after he put a stent, I had one stent, no other coronary artery blockages, no other, as the doc would say, bumps and bruises in my heart. It was just this one event. And he went in and put a big stent in, saved my life. And he even said to me, he goes, Brad, I have no idea why you did not die. He goes, I literally,
yeah, that's comforting.
That's great.
Why you didn't die.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, what was my purpose then too? And then we have gone on here at our school to impact thousands of students and graduates. And they have story after story of lives that they have saved.
Yeah, so, 16 years of stuff you wouldn't have had anything to do with.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that is wild. You a vegan now with your 99% blockage over here? Like he's like, yeah, I walk 30,000 steps a day, and I'm a vegan.
He went raw vegan.
I say I have a stress test every day. I was on the treadmill this morning, right?
Great.
15% great. Yeah.
Oh man. So what I actually did want to sort of talk about your other work, the leadership, or the leadership side of your life, because I think it's such a natural, especially after hearing what you're saying. It's almost like I was curious about how you made that bridge. Now I'm not at all curious, but because you did that too. This leadership side of you, does that feel like it's just a natural extension of what you were doing? You're like, hey, let me codify this and teach people how to just be graceful leaders under stressful situations, which is basically everything these days.
And I think it's because of all those years of experiences, both out in the EMS world, but also in the fire service and on the fire ground. And I've led small groups in an engine company, and now as a bigger, I lead at the command level, where as a shift commander. And I had the real fortunate to attend the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative at Harvard, So I got to spend a good time at Harvard going through the MPLI and learning about crisis leadership, and then being able to take what I've learned there, and plus the experiences I've had not only in the field, but also too as an entrepreneur. And by the way, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't want to own a business. I was a teacher, and I am a teacher. And but I love being an entrepreneur. And there is a lot of leadership involved in that. And I think you have to have the emotional intelligence and the business acumen on the entrepreneur side. But those are all learned traits, and leadership is learned, right? Yeah, people say people are born leaders, but just like I think Vince Lombardi said they're made just like everything else, right? Like people, and I've seen that, and I've lived that history of both having the core values that my dad instilled in me as I like to call them the pearls of Marine Corps wisdom, right? And how he led people into battle, and how he led in the Marine Corps, and some of those core values that I grew up with, and being in the fire service, there has to be both. There has to be some form of, especially if you're an officer, you have to lead people, and I have to lead people into battle, right? One of the harshest environments you could ever crawl into is a house fire. And if you think about not only the heat, the smoke, the level of physiology that your body is being pushed to is off the chart, and I don't think people realize that. I was at a fire where I was the incident commander, where we had a report of a 14-year-old girl trapped in a back bedroom, and after the fire was over, and that young girl wasn't there, but after the fire was over, and I wasn't physically actually even fighting the fire, which made this even more incredible. I was wearing a glucose monitor though, and my glucose spiked well over 200.
Wow!
In a blink of an eye. So you think from a physiological standpoint, the cortisol release, the epinephrine release, all of the chemicals that are going on, and the things that are happening in the moment in your body, and so going back to the leadership stuff, particularly around crises, and I wrote another book called The First Responder's Advantage, and
that was I saw that earlier, and I didn't know if that was fitting in there.
Yeah, well, that book was really designed to help other first responders to start up and grow a business, because and the goal was not to get them to leave our profession, but more so, a lot of folks struggled to get to financial freedom working in public safety jobs. I mean, I worked 96-hour work weeks for most of my young adulthood, particularly when we had kids.
Crazy, man.
That's crazy.
I worked 2 full-time jobs. I literally worked, 2 48-hour shifts. Literally like two jobs, 96-hour work weeks for years. And then after that, and because you can't, we had 3 children. And if you have kids and what it's like to grind, if you're going to grind, you have to grind, right? And
you got to grind.
Our family, and you can't. Think of the cost of daycare. Can you imagine what it costs to put 3 kids in daycare if my wife went to work too? I mean, my wife's a nurse, but and she worked per diem, and she did some other stuff. My wife's an angel. She's a hospice nurse practitioner. She does hospice and palliative care. Which I talk a little bit about in the book too, and you think from a perspective of, one, why do we do what we do, but also we know that life can change in a blink of an eye, and whether it's bad news because you just got this really catastrophic cancer diagnosis, or something really bad happened that day, your house burned down, you went into cardiac arrest. I literally just got off a call with a gentleman who in 2014 went into cardiac arrest in a Chick-fil-A. And nobody knew what to do, except this one 17-year-old girl in the back part of she was working there, and she had taken like a healthcare class, and her manager knew that. And they grabbed the 17-year-old girl and brought her out front into the Chick-fil-A. She started CPR and bridged the gap for fire and EMS to show up. And this guy saved his life. And now he's created this national CPR movement. Like, amazing stories. So that, to me, when I think of leadership, there's so many areas in our life that we lead every single day, whether it be with our kids, with our family, but also with the work that we do too as well. And it's that humility that we bring that changes everything. Because if you can understand of where we need to go from a visionary standpoint, because I think of leadership as more visionary, and showing people the way. And
Mhm.
really, it's like, okay, folks, follow me. And that's where trust, particularly around leadership, people have to trust you. They have to see
Right.
you in that position. And I think it's difficult for individuals and I like to go back. It's like, not only is it trust, but we see leaders, everybody, I think, if we were to look and say, what are the traits and characteristics of leaders? What are their qualities? What are the things that they do every single day? The best
Mhm.
ones begin with loving their people, loving the people around them, coming from a place and leading from a place of empathy. And because I think if you understand that, I mean, we see autocratic leaders. There's all kinds of different types of leaders, right? But to me, some of the best leaders that I've seen and studied are ones that take care of their people. They love those folks around them, and they're empathetic, and they can understand, maybe why something happened or why somebody made a decision, and they can give grace. And I think my career in fire and EMS has shown that there are so many challenges that people go through on a daily basis. If we could extend some of that grace because, somebody just was having a bad day that day. I'm literally driving here this morning, and some guy jumps off of he's in the handicap van, and he literally like guns it, pulls off of a curb. I blow the horn to let him know that I'm there. And he gets like so angry at me. He's like it was my fault. I'm
Right.
I'm in the road. The guy just came off the curb, and I was like, he's yelling at me like, I'm not going to engage. That guy's having a really bad day. I don't know. He's in a handicap van. I don't know what he deals with every single day. I just wave.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think from a leadership standpoint, particularly in crisis, you have to think about this now. When you have to make high level cognitive decisions in extremis with a limited amounts of information and compressed time to do it. That's what a fireground commander deals with. That's what happens when you're in crisis mode, is that you have all this limited information and you have to make decisions based on the best information that you have now. And you can't get paralyzed by that. And if you think about, companies, organizations, businesses, there's no discretionary time in those types of decisions where someone's life is on the line. Move out to a time. My favorite saying is, "There's no HR emergencies," right? So from a leadership standpoint, there isn't, right? You have
That's very
discretionary
true.
So when you think of the intersection of leadership between crisis leadership and then leadership on a daily basis, they're truly, not only are they married, but they're really different. And when you have to take a step back for a second and say, what makes an individual a great leader? That's where I love to unpack those kind of things, and I've written about it. And I love Simon Sinek's work that he's done.
I love that.
Yeah. Leaders Eat Last. I actually had the real privilege to spend a week at Quantico with the Marines. With the
Nice.
I was in their Marine Corps leadership class for educators, and they brought us down for a week to go at Quantico so that to understand how they train future Marine leaders. That was an amazing
of course.
course.
I mean, I want to do that right now.
Be?
I'm
Yeah,
like, how do I sign up for that?
I know.
That's amazing.
I know. When I tell people that, they can't believe it, but it was an amazing week. And I have some.
Oh, I'm sure.
By the way, but that
was. Well, you know what I love about all this is like, and I had a talk track years ago on this, but this idea of multidisciplinary thinking, like everything you're saying is like, there's like 10 different disciplines, 100 different disciplines that you're like weaving together at any given second. And it's not, the answer isn't like tracked, right? It's not one of these things. It's a combination of all 20 of these things. And I feel like that's kind of lost in the meme generation, right? Like where everything should be summarized in like a meme, right? And it's, I don't want to pick on memes. There's plenty of funny memes out there, but when your attention is curtailed down to that level, then thinking wide like you're doing it becomes, I don't want to say a luxury, but definitely a rarity, to have that skill set. And I think that is why I was like, I wonder, there's got to be a direct translation to the leadership side, because those skills are not commonplace. I wouldn't think.
No, and it sounds like they've been forged over your lifetime and were strongly influenced by your dad. And like, it seems like you were teed up just perfectly to be where you are too, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
I think you're number one. You're right. Like started with my dad and instilling the core values that he had and what he stood for his whole life. And when you see that up close, it rubs off. And it's also how, as a caregiver of taking care of people, because that's what we do in EMS and in the fire service. And that's how we make decisions, by the way, too. I always say it's really simple as a leader to make decisions. People make it way too complicated. I have a litmus test. And here's the three things. Is it right for the people that we serve? So if I'm making a decision, is it right for the people we serve? Is it right for our organization, meaning that the fire department or the NMETC, our school? Is it right for the people is it right for our organization? And is it right for the people that serve in our organization? And then would my mom be proud of it if she read about it in the newspaper tomorrow?
Yeah,
right?
I like that last one.
Yeah, and it's because that all boils down to just do the right thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and if you don't know what the right thing looks like, you probably shouldn't be in that leadership position. But that comes with the experiences, right, of failure. That comes with the experiences of seeing other leaders, positive and negative, right? Because we all go.
Yeah.
I teach a class on leadership to our paramedic program, and I put up one slide, and I say, "Who is the worst leader you ever worked with? What does that look like? What did that and the slide is like some picture of a guy screaming at somebody, pointing the finger, yelling at somebody. Right?
Yeah.
And then the next slide says, who is the best leader you ever worked with? And why did you like working for them? What were their traits and characteristics? What did they do every day? How did they make you feel? See, because I think, and I don't mean like in a touchy-feely way, I'm talking about visceral. And you know what I mean by that, right?
Yeah,
like, you meet an individual, I'm a hugger.
And
So it's the funniest thing. Like people, I say that to people all the time. And one day I'll say to students in the school, like, "Hey, listen, if you're having a bad day, you need a hug, come find me. I'll give you a hug." And I remember like this.
I love it.
One guy says to me one day, like, "You can't hug students." I'm like, I'm not like hugging them in a weird way, but in a human way. I mean, think about that now. Human beings, we need emotional connection. And from a leadership standpoint, if you can't gain that emotional connection, if you stay staunch, then people probably won't trust you. And I don't think you can be really successful. I mean, some would argue that, right? Like some would argue that they could be successful just being that autocratic leader. They'll get the job done.
I don't buy it. Yeah,
right?
no.
Well, yeah, you see that. Maybe you see that in business and stuff, Brad, and then you just you know that you don't like that person. Right. I mean, we can picture some really successful business people, and I can't say how much I would want to be in the same room with any of them.
I couldn't agree more.
And like, let's not even go into the thousands of pages of research into what just putting your hand on somebody's shoulder in a time of crisis,
that human connection,
just that energy transfer is undeniably powerful. So like a hug when somebody needs it is,
that's more healing than almost anything you could do. Yeah.
Granted, look, Tom and I get to talk to you from a position of extreme luxury in the sense we get to talk to people like you about this all the time. And so it's less weird for us. But like when you're saying that, I'm like, no, fuck that. Of course, a hug makes all the sense in the world.
It makes
in
absolute
this
sense.
Context, right? And even that, I mean, look, if you could make room for that pressure to go away for long enough for their own physiology to take over and calm them down and make it happen, then that might be all you need, right?
I heard this term co-regulation the other day.
Oh yeah.
Like, you're like somebody's burnt out. They're going through it. They don't have the juice to kind of self-regulate, but you put your hand on their shoulder, you give them a hug, and now they're a little bit stronger, and you get a little dopamine boost too.
Yeah, I had one young lady, once who gave me a hug, and she said, and she held on, and because she was going through some stuff, and I gave her a hug, and she held on to me, and she said, I feel like my heart is talking to your heart.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Meanwhile, the HR emergency, you're like, is this turning into an HR emergency? I don't know. So, Brad, listen, I could talk to you all day, man.
Yeah,
I really,
you're
these
so
stories
much
are
fun
amazing.
to listen to.
Let's talk about book or where we want to send you. I
do
know
the
you're a
commercial,
speaker.
Brad.
Let's do the Brad commercial, shall
all right. So The Saved Effect, it's an incredibly powerful book around human stories. And then what the outcomes of people's lives have been post when someone acted. And the goal is really to be inspired by our book, learn CPR if you don't know it, get trained in CPR, and be ready and willing to act. Because we know that there is an intersection of individuals where they won't step forward because they're not sure what to do. There is a phenomenon called the bystander effect that we hope to dispel. It is a real thing, but we hope that people can create movement so that they're not just a bystander. And that these stories in our book, The Saved Effect, will help individuals connect the human stories to action. And it's also, for any first responder out there who might be listening to you, it's incredibly cathartic because it connects our why back to why we do what we do.
Right.
Right. And so if for the show here, if you go to our website, thesavedeffect.com, you'll see that you can buy our book at any of where we sell books, Barnes and Nobles, and right now it's in Amazon and some other places. It's in pre-sale. The actual physical hard copy will be delivered on August 18th. But if you go buy it now, right at our website, we created a whole package so that you can get instant access to the manuscript. You get a free version of our initial audiobook that Kira and I personally recorded. We have a book of quotes out there, and we have a free hands-only CPR education video that we did.
Oh, cool!
Wow, that's great.
All of that for $28. I mean,
yeah.
And
I love it.
I'll tell you right now, when people that have read it, whether it be whether it be lay people or first responders, everybody loves it.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's very easy to find. I just did before the show, I just did a search for you, and like 50 links come up with the book. So we'll put them in our show for sure. But yeah, it's very easy to find, and it's super cool. And like I said, the stories were really interesting. I can't believe it's gone this long. 200 and something episodes, 260 something episodes.
Yeah.
You never talked to an EMT before.
Yeah, and honestly,
yeah,
man,
it feels a little weird.
I don't think we need to talk to another one.
I think we're good, man. This was great.
Everything I'd hoped it would be, and a great way to end a Friday afternoon with a real positive message, man. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And listen, if you ever find yourself, you have some questions that you just said dying to answer back from a pre-hospital provider or firefighter.
Love it.
Call me back. I'd love to come back. I love the conversation. Thanks, John.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you, Brad.
I actually would love to hear you and Terry have a conversation.
Yeah,
one day,
man.
and just
I think
be
that'd
a
be
fly on
great.
the wall. Just let you two loose. You guys would. It would be. Tom and I wouldn't get a word in edgewise.
Look, man, I would. There's two things. Either I'm quiet because I don't want to talk to the person, or I'm quiet because I can't stop listening. And Brad, you were definitely someone I couldn't stop listening to.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate that. Appreciate the discussion.
Brad, thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody, and see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.